We're going to kick off with, actually, it's three questions in one. This one from Kyle LeBeuf, sorry. Hey, gents, exclamation point, first time question asker here. And my question is this. Obviously, there's much that has been written and spoken about the Switch 2's $450 USD price point. What does this mean for consoles and handhelds releasing in the future? Obviously, Nintendo is usually on the more affordable side of the console pricing scale, and this seems like a dramatic escalation of the cost of hardware. Caboose967, Aloha DF, with the announcement of for pricing of Switch games and the ever-looming GTA 6 price of $100. What are your thoughts about talking about price of a game in a review? I always say there's no such thing as a bad game, but a bad price. Not sure about that. Hello, Bespoke Brothers, says Speedworth. I like that. The announcement of $80 digital and $90 physical base games is absolutely ridiculous. At this point, GTA 6 will be $100 base. We are living in dark times. It's an interesting discussion point, right? Because, yes, it is expensive. These games are super, super expensive. And at the same time, we're seeing comparisons with Steam Deck that's less money, where the games are obviously going to cost less simply because by virtue of, that PC games living on Steam. The concept of very expensive physical games, that's worrying as well. The price point of the Switch itself, let's start with that. I understand it to a certain extent because inflation has been dramatically huge over the last few years, specifically because of the pandemic. Secondly, on top of inflation, you've got the fact that the spec points of the new Switch are significantly better in many ways than we expected. I mean, the processor itself, circa 200 square millimeters, might be an older fabrication node, but even so, bigger processor, bigger console, bigger screen, higher specification screen. All of this stuff costs money, and the concept of prices reducing over time was what it once was. So I was hoping for a $399, $450. I mean, there's also the question of whether Nintendo is trying to factor in potential tariff increases. I don't think it could have even
predicted
thought about how big they would actually be. Oliver, let's talk about the price of the console first.
Well, $450. It's not that much higher than the price of the OG Switch in inflation-adjusted terms. I think the OG Switch, $300 in 2017 is about $390 today. So you look at that price, you look at what Nintendo is delivering in terms of the enhancements to that processor, which is like 200 millimeters squared. It's a pretty big, beefy chip. They've got a big cooling system in there. They've got the advanced display, which maybe is not as advanced as I thought a few days ago, but is still a pretty good display there. They've got a lot of tech that's built into that, and I think, to me at least, it's justified. When you look at other cost increases across the sector, I think it is a justified cost here. Certainly, I think it's a justified cost for a lot of users. But for Americans, it's a little bit trickier, and we are talking in USD, so perhaps that's worth mentioning for a second, because the tariff on Chinese products in general, it's 54% as a base rate. For Vietnam, it's 46% as a base rate. Those are two key countries that have produced the Switch 1 units, historically speaking. Other Asian countries that might be situated in a favorable position to produce, parts of the Switch 2 or the Switch 2 itself, South Korea, Japan, they also have substantial tariffs. Other countries have substantial tariffs there. So I think Nintendo probably picked $450 with some expectation, like there was probably some expectation of some tariff craziness priced in, but this level of tariffs, again, if it's sustained, because we don't really know what's going on here at all or what will happen, it's up to the whims of one individual. It might change things quite a bit. So that's definitely a real wild card for people in the United States. Although I understand Nintendo's probably stockpiled a lot of Switch units in advance of their actual release date here. So hopefully that will keep the price within reasonable bounds for some period there. On the game side of things, I'm pretty open to games having more flexible pricing if people become more open to that idea. I think a lot of people would be fine with a more flexible pricing arrangement if, say, your kind of mid-tier, mid-budget titles were coming in at $40 or $50 instead of $60 or $70, I think a lot of people would be open to that kind of pricing arrangement. Maybe there's kind of a missing middle in console game prices between your kind of eShop titles, your kind of digital titles that are often $10 or $20, and your like AAA fare at the top end with your $70 prices, and indeed your $80 prices now with Mario Kart. But we'll have to see how this goes. I think it's an experiment that a lot of people are watching in the industry. I'm sure Rockstar Games is watching this with interest. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in this concept because there has been this notion that big games in the industry are underpriced relative to the value that they deliver. And Nintendo is kind of jumping into this conversation and saying Mario Kart World is worth $80. Now, for me, I'm sure it's worth $80 in terms of the content that they're delivering, in terms of the open world structure. I think they are delivering a meaningfully much larger game than the prior Mario Kart title. But yeah, I'm not sure the gaming audience will respond so favorably. But I actually wouldn't mind ultimately seeing a bit of a more flexible pricing model with respect to some of these games. And maybe for your GTAs, your Mario Karts, your Mario Odysseys, titles like this, maybe that price should indeed be $10 higher because you're getting so much more game for that price. It seems kind of almost silly to keep that price so inflexible. Do you know what I'm saying?
Alex, are we living in dark times, as Speedworth says here? Well, we
in many ways,
are.
yes.
In many ways, yeah.
Yes, we are. Yeah, but I will also just say, like, I'm just gonna be like the most like reasonable I can be and say like stuff just can't always be the same price forever. They have this phrase, you know, like a 5 and dime in English, right? Like a store that sold things for 5 cents or 10 cents. That doesn't exist anymore, right? So things do have to go up in price. But obviously, whether or not you view that price as justified based upon your income situation is a whole other question. And I think for a lot of people, increasing the price of a game by 10 to 20 US dollars is actually enough to say, well, maybe I can't buy 3 games in 1 month, but I can only buy 2 reasonably because all these other things are also increasing in prices, right? It's always like, there's not just like vacuum. Games aren't the only things that are getting more expensive, but everything is. So I think it can have an effect there. But like Oliver, I'd be really happy also if this meant a greater flexibility in prices overall so that you could see games being priced lower lower depending upon almost like what their subjective tier could be considered. The only thing I'm a little bit worried about is Nintendo keeps prices very rigid. Like the Switch didn't get a price drop in the traditional sense throughout its entire life. So Switch 2 not getting a price drop over that time and just sticking with this $450. I think that would definitely maybe hurt its sales potential over time in comparison to the last console.
No price parity between digital and physical. It does seem like Nintendo is telling you, hey, why don't you buy this game digitally rather than getting it physical? I mean, it's clear sort of steering of the customer towards their storefront. And obviously they save a ton of cash in having to physically produce these cartridges, which will be more expensive to make than a disc, for example, or indeed digital download bandwidth cost. I don't know. The Treehouse stream happened yesterday, and the feedback just seemed to be people talking about the price. The price is dominating the discussion here. There's no doubt about it. And I do wonder about at some point, you're going to be able to go into a shop and buy a Switch 2 without any problems. There'll be no sort of availability issues. And, for a parent possibly buying a Switch 2 for their child and they pick up the Switch 2, but then they see, Mario Kart $80 or whatever next to it, then that's going to possibly give pause. So I think you're right. We do need this kind of diverse range of prices. It's going to be tricky, but obviously the news has gone down extremely badly, I think. And I'm interested to see what Nintendo is going to do about it. Is it just going to weather the storm? Probably. Is it going to actually come up with some kind of way to sweeten the deal? The concept of even the kind of system demo costing money to download. that's not great, is it? I guess at least there is the bundle pack with Mario Kart World, which, does seem to be reasonable value, I guess. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? Prices are going up, that's for sure. The concept of being able to get technology that's massively more advanced and cheaper, just generally as a concept, is going away. Went away ages ago on a smartphone, for example. Price points on existing current generation consoles, PlayStation 5 Series X. We haven't seen massive price reductions there across the generation there at all. PS5 Pro, obviously, that was expensive as well. So this is part of the reality, or indeed the quote-unquote dark times that we're living with at the moment.